in the music and how you came to meet Alex in the first place.
Yeah, I started playing pretty early, really. Like when I was 14 or something, 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Just around the time the Beatles were hitting in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really the only thing up to that point that had, encouraged me to get into music of any kind. I mean, they were the only thing that sort of moved me, to be interested in rock and roll or music, guitar playing, such.
Well, you saw the whole idea and you thought, that's what I'd like to do?
Well, we just sort of did it for, a lark at first, really.
Yeah, I think most people did start off
Yeah,
when they saw the Beatles.
When I started, a very few people were just sort of starting to play. I mean, in school, we're getting, acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
And playing folk songs and the Kingston Trio and
Yeah,
that kind
sure.
of stuff,
Mm.
I mean, in the States, that was what was happening.
Yeah.
So the Beatles came out, and then, somebody would get a bass guitar, and we'd have a couple of acoustics and try to do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That went on for, I guess, a year or two, until I got really turned on to some English stuff, which was like The Who's first album and Yardbirds,
Yeah.
So I started playing in several electric groups with some people that are now still with Art and working, in and out of Big Star, really.
Mm.
Terry Manning and Richard Roseborough, who played on Radio City.
Yeah.
Played in some early bands with him. And this is still back in high school days, playing with a pretty early group. And Alex came and did a couple of gigs with us, which was before he had joined the Box Tops.
Mm.
And he didn't take it very seriously at all, he just had it sort of a mimic or, something he could do with his voice to make it sound very gruff,
Yeah.
and to him it was a joke, so sometimes he'd come in and sing like that just as a joke, and then walk off after 2 numbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, what time would this be? In what year would you say?
About 66,
Yeah.
I think, when I first started playing with Alex, I
Yeah.
guess.
Because a lot was happening in 66 at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, quite a bit, really. I mean, the Rolling Stones were getting very big.
Yeah.
And the Beatles were still doing well, and some American groups had popped up, plus all the Herman and the Hermits and all that that was coming over with the Dave Clark Five and all that. I mean, that was pretty much dominating the charts in the States. And up to then, it had been groups like, the Shirelles and the Essex and
the Surf Sound and...
Yeah. So Alex had was interested at that time more in stuff like Otis Redding,
Yeah.
And I had roots pretty deep in the Beatles and English rock. And we continued on. Alex sort of drifted off and wasn't really very interested back then in music because he wasn't playing any instruments, So around 68, I sort of got tired of playing all the... I mean, we were being like human jukeboxes, you know? I mean, playing Sam and Dave.
Sure. Whatever was popular at the time, you'd churn out night after night.
Which was mostly soul music. So we started sort of an underground movement, at high school to get a group up that would play just English music, Which was, again, I think Terry Manning and Richard Roseborough and a couple of other guys.
Yeah.
Eventually Andy Hummel joined up with us in all sorts of different, forms of groups, because one person would go off and do another thing, plus was bored trying to keep up with school, but we got pretty heavily involved in English rock, and that was sort of a dream for us to be able to go and play and smash up equipment and turn up loud and all that. So, I don't know, we did that for a year or so. Some people, came and went. I got together with Andy and Jody around 69. And we were playing 3-piece stuff, which was, still Jimi Hendrix and the James Gang and The Who, a lot of Who stuff, and a few Beatle tunes.
Well, what areas were you playing at that time? What areas of the country? Just locally, or?
Yeah, Memphis, really, and around, some of Little Rock,
and
Mississippi.
There was an audience for this Anglo rock that you
They hated
doing.
most of it, really.
Yeah.
They would come up and say, please play I Feel Fine, and I knew they were talking about James Brown, but we'd play I Feel Fine by the Beatles instead.
Yeah, I see.
In a way, they hated us, but we introduced a lot of stuff to Memphis, with the strobe lights and psychedelic music,
Really?
when the wave came in, we were, not many people at all were doing that, and nobody was listening to Jimi Hendrix, and they were still pretty strong, at least in the high school scenes, with Sam and Dave and Otis Redding and all that.
So your band then were one of the forerunners in bringing that style
in Memphis,
music
yeah.
and playing to Memphis, yeah.
Yeah, because there were a few people around that were really, pretty devoted to music and realized that most of what was really happening was coming out of the new, say, R&B wave from England, after all the Mercy sound and, Freddie and the Dreamers and all that had come to an end.
So what happened, Alex got involved with the Box Tops then?
Yeah, he was about 16 or 17, and I hadn't seen him for a couple of years, really. Maybe once or twice. And I was over at his house when a disc jockey from Memphis, Roy Mack, I think, brought over some tunes by a country artist for Alex to listen to, and I think at that time Alex was playing in a band called Ronnie and the DeVilles or something.
Yeah, I think there's a line on that in the bio, that's right,
Yeah.
Ronnie and the DeVilles.
So this guy brought over the tapes, and I remember hearing the tape with the letter, which was a country tune, but he said we want a sort of Motown sound, and we've got Spooner Oldham, and the other guy, Dan Penn. And, all you have to do is just come in and do that voice that you do, and we've got it all set up, know. So they talked it over with his parents, and he left school and that whole scene. And went off and, did that, but I didn't hear much of it. They started playing the tune on the radio, and we were listening to it,
Yeah.
but didn't realize it was Alex.
Yeah.
And we were a bit surprised when we found out, so he pressed on with that for a while. But I think didn't like it very much because it was a very uncreative scene, I think, in the studio, because I dropped in for 1 or 2 sessions. And it was just studio musicians, really, and they would push him before the mic and hand him the words, and just tell him to repeat what he'd heard. Plus the gigs that they were playing, I think, were pretty bad. They were playing like gymnasiums and stuff like that. And
I think I've read that he admits that it was a terrible group and that the people on the records weren't the people on the road and, the whole scene.
Well, they had I think a road manager, Vince Alfonso, who they later brought in as our manager.
Yeah.
Which, I wasn't too keen on, but the others said, well, yeah, let's have him. And the same thing happened sort of all over again in a way. They started playing crummy jobs.
Yeah. So, when he left them, how did he drifted back to Memphis, right? And you sort of renewed your acquaintanceship? Yeah,
well, we've been seeing each other sort of off and on, because I'd known him, he was a sort of high school friend.
Yeah.
He went to New York after he left. I think he walked off stage or something one night, because it was so awful,
Yeah.
He went to New York and stayed there for a year and met Keith Sykes and Loudon Wainwright and people like that. And was starting to pick up some acoustic licks, just learning how to play, country stuff and what was going on in New York at the time, which I guess was like 69, 70. I had started first year at college and was rooming with Andy Hummel, the bass player, and trying to stay pretty closely involved, really. It wasn't much of a college thing, it was a university, and we were just, getting higher, tripping all the time and listening to music instead of studying, which is all I was interested in. So after a year of that, I came back to Memphis. Andy came back too, and we started playing again with Jody.
Yeah. So how did sort of Big Star actually come about? How was it formulated?
Alex came down from New York and, had heard us play and talked to me about going to New York with him to do a sort of duo thing,
Yeah.
Like I would play electric guitar and he would play acoustic or something, Maybe like Simon and Garfunkel or something, I don't know. But he had been into an acoustic scene and I'd been into the electric scene and didn't really want to leave my band. But we spent a couple of weeks formulating plans and stuff, and we were really excited, because he had done an album already with Ardent, which was never released.
Has it still been unreleased, or is it out?
Yeah, it's still in the can.
Yeah.
One of the tunes off of his first album, Free Again or something, I think, was changed around and was made to give me another chance for the first album. But the rest of the material is still, unreleased.
Did you aim for a Big Star sound? Did you sort of sit down and say, let's think what we can sound like? Or did it just sort of come together naturally with all your different influences?
In a way, we dug each other and respected each other, Alex and I. I really began, we didn't set out for a sound. We set out with some plans, for like an image and contracts and what kind of music we liked and so forth, And I could tell that he had sort of in a way different tastes than
Yeah.
I had, but we both really respected each other's taste.
Yeah.
And as we were starting rehearsals, he decided, well, that he would come to Memphis and stay with the group, because I was pretty heavily involved also at Arden by that time, and had been doing some recording there on my own with Jody and with Andy and with all kinds of different people, just to learn how to engineer and how to learn how to, what it was like in the studio and to produce and so forth.
From what I gather, Arden were quite an enthusiastic record company. Would you go along with that?
Yeah, really quite, for Memphis, But their arrangement was that anybody that had any prospect and wasn't totally awful, could sort of come in there and work for nothing. Not anybody, but if there was a person that had been hanging around there, which is what like I did and Andy did for a long time, until you reach the status of being able to go in after hours and record your own stuff, or maybe bring in a couple of friends, to work with. John Fry, the guy that owned it, would let you come in, and if you could do something, with the record company afterwards, after you'd assembled some masters or something, then he would just, expect repayment for the time that you'd used otherwise,
So, presumably the contract that the group got, it wasn't too hard to get signed to the record label. They obviously are...
No, not really. I was friends with the guys that were, Terry Manning and Fry were sort of running the studio then.
Yeah.
Around the time that we started rehearsing, they had a separate building there, which was going to be a studio, but never was, so they let us use the building to rehearse in sometimes, or we'd rehearse at Alex's house.
Yeah.
But around that time, they had decided they wanted to form a record label. And previously to that, when Alex did his first album with them, the reason it was never released was they were trying to do the record label thing again. Well, not again, but they were trying to do it then, but form the label around Alex, they would offer Alex's album to Atlantic or something, say, we'll give you this if you'll give us a label. So they were using that for sort of bargaining power,
Yeah, that they were sort of leaning on his experience with the box tops, presumably, then.
Yeah. Because, after he'd left the box tops, there were plenty of labels that were interested in getting, Bobby box top.
Sure.
Anyway, that fell through, and at first Alex was pretty skeptical about Arden because of that experience, when we formed Big Star. But I sort of convinced him it would be a good idea. We started rehearsals and started doing some tracks, and asked John if he'd like to engineer them for us, and he said yes. So we did about 12 basic tracks. And after we'd done the tracks, we did, say, 10 tracks, all 9 or 10.
Yeah.
We started working on them ourselves. I was engineering, and I knew how to engineer, so I'd just have Alex or Andy over. I'd be running the board while they were in the studio, or I'd run the board and plug in the guitar to an amp that was in the studio, punch record and go.
I noticed that on the first album, the #1 record, there's only one song that you didn't have a hand in writing. Most of them you did with Alex. Were the songs already written, or did you write them specifically for the album, or were they songs from when you had been playing before?
Most of them, except for, say, 4 songs on the album, I guess, had accumulated over the past 2 years. Try Again and My Life Is Right, I had recorded before Big Star, really, with Jody and Tom Eubanks, who wrote half of My Life Is Right, played on that.
Yeah.
And I did Try Again, I guess, all by myself, really. So they were pretty much recorded and ready to go. Alex, overdubbed a harmony on both of those songs.
Yeah.
And a little bit of acoustic work, for both of them. And I think a slide guitar on Try Again.
How long were you in the studios cutting that first album?
About a year.
A year?
Yeah. Aside from what, I had done before, but we started the tracks, I think, in August of 71, 72.
Was it?
I don't know.
A long time ago.
I guess the album, I think it's dated 72.
It's strange that, because on the album they've got April 72 down here. Then in the bio it said that it started recording in September of 72 and it was re-released in March 73. So that's a little confusing. There's sort of a conflict there.
I don't know about that. I know that we started in the summer, I think August, and it was probably 71, and I think I went to Australia around Christmas that year. And then about the summer of '72, we finally got it out.
Were you pleased with the album, the way it turned out? Or were there a lot of criticisms?
Well, in a way I was disappointed. I mean, I liked almost all the songs a whole lot, you know. I liked Alex's songs a whole lot.
Yeah, I think the songs on that are good, actually.
We were pretty much sort of taking over the production of the album, you know.
Yeah.
And there were a hell of a lot of arguments between Terry and Carol Manning about the cover. Because Terry was vice president of the company and Carol was his wife. And she was sort of supposed to be in charge of album covers, you know. So there were big arguments about that because we wanted the picture on the front.
Yeah.
And the pictures we'd shot before that actually were much better. And she came in to shoot them over again, and there were arguments during the sessions, you know. And then, like, during mixing, I tended to be very conservative about the mixing and suppress a lot of things that we wanted to bring out. And while we were in the studio, you know, it's sort of like we were raising hell every night, you know, from 12 to 4, 5, just having a good time recording. And we would do rough mixes and be really up about the mixes, you know, because if the cowbell, you know, if we wanted it loud, it was right up front. Whereas when we were mixing, all that was suppressed. So in a way, I was constantly fighting during the mixes for more balls and you know. Basically, I'm pretty happy with it, you know. There are a lot of things now after a couple of years that I'd like to change or done over.
Would you agree, going back to the bio again, it said that the album, I think it says it got lost in the reshuffle of the distributor. Would you agree with that? Or was it promoted to everybody's?
Promoted only, really, by the Arden staff. I mean, they had taken on a separate staff for the company, you know, and at first were being distributed by Stax. And Terry Manning, as vice president of Arden, was also pretty heavily involved with Stax, and Al Bell, who was vice president of Stax. In that he was engineering and almost co-producing, say, all the Staple Singers tunes. And most of the heavy product that was coming out of Stax around '72 was, in a sense, masterminded by Manning, you know. And as a result, he had a lot of influence with Al Bell and Stax. And he resented us in a lot of ways, I think, you know, because he was producing his own group. And he felt like we were getting more attention than his group. And plus there were those, you know, arguments with his wife.
So it could have been pushed a whole lot more than what they actually. It got good reviews, you see. I mean, it got very favourable reviews.
I think they did a pretty good job, really, of publicity. I mean, we had nice ads in Billboard and Cashbox, and nice reviews all over, you know. And I mean, what Arden did was good. They got records to all the disc jockeys, you know, and rock writers and so forth. And even, I mean, after they left, I think Arden put on the rock writers convention, you know.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And so I think they were staying pretty active, you know, in the promotion of art and the groups and so forth. But Stax really did not much of anything except for put out some money, you know, for the ads. And support it, you know, like half of the company's activities.
Now, when the album was released, did the band, the four of you, go out on the road promoting it? Were you doing gigs promoting it?
While I was in it, there were some, but, you know, not enough to please me, you know, which was one of my arguments, was that Stax wasn't getting any records in the stores. You know, people were writing for records, which, I mean, showed something, you know, that there were people who liked the record and wanted it bad enough to even write a recording studio to get it. And Stax or Columbia or whoever just couldn't get it in the stores or something. Or there were politics, you know, that Columbia would sooner sell a Columbia album than a Stax album, much less an ardent Stax album. I wanted to get the group out in areas where we had airplay to promote it, and we did a good gig in New Orleans. You know, it was rather exciting, really, because we got there the night before the job, and they were sort of having I mean, for us, it was like the Beatles in New York. You know, there were big star songs being played every half hour or something, and we did a gig at some sort of pop festival the next day, and there was a good reception and front page and all that.
Were you getting better reception in certain areas of the country? I mean, was it the South primarily?
We did well in New York and New Orleans. I think a good bit in Texas also, you know. In scattered areas, really. There was not that much support in Memphis, surprisingly. I mean, we had a sort of underground following in a way, especially from a lot of people who had dug what we were doing back in '68, you know, Andy and Jody and I.
People had followed you right through and
Yeah.
Been with you all the way.
Because we had, come up and then disappeared and come up, and sometimes when we came up playing Led Zeppelin stuff, and there were some people who really enjoyed that, because I guess they were first starting to turn onto drugs or something, and we had all the tape echo and everything, and nobody else did.
Right. So when did you decide to leave the band?
Wow. I guess it was 73 or right around Christmas of 72 or something.
Yeah.
Wow, there were terrible arguments, between the band, and it was getting very political and less musical. Alex had, in a sense, left and was playing with some other guys while the album was still being recorded, because I was spending a lot of time in the studio overdubbing.
Yeah.
Trying to get the tapes right, and Alex was really doing nothing, So
was this the first album or the second album?
The first album.
The first one, yeah.
So at that time I was going to school, also working as an engineer at Ardent. I was trying to do the Big Star thing, and that was taking up a lot of my time. And Alex, I guess, had too much free time, so he was playing with Richard Roseburg and Ken Woodley, who played on my new album.
Yeah.
So in a way we were sort of drifting apart, plus Andy was encouraged, that maybe the India song was the best song on the album, and he had to go solo by some people at Ardent, and it was bad, it was bad news.
So the whole thing kind of drifted apart, really, without...
It was hard to hold it together, The gigs were depressing because they put us in some really bizarre small towns, with populations of 400 in Mississippi, where nobody liked pop music anyway.
Yeah.
We did a few good gigs, but it was, there were arguments because Alex and Andy didn't really enjoy playing those kind of jobs. And Jody was really good, and wanted to play anything, get out and work. And I pretty much wanted to play anything, but I was pretty disgusted by some of the things they booked us into.
Did you think, actually, that the band had potential? Did you think that if it had, if the circumstances had been right and you'd all kept plugging at it, it would have...
yeah, I still do. Really. I mean, there are chances of us working together again,
Yeah.
But I would say the chances would be enhanced if Alex can divorce himself from Ardent's studio, because in a way I sort of resented what they did and didn't really see going back to that after I'd seen what had happened with Radio City. But Alex is still pretty well hung up with Ardent because of his contracts, and it keeps money coming into him, I guess, and he feels fairly secure.
Yeah.
But I don't know how long he'll stay that way.
I didn't think that the second album... the sound on it seemed to be a bit too diverse, there was an overall feel to the first album, but I like this album, but I don't think it's as good as the first one, now whether that's because, well, I don't know, he started writing songs with Andy then, right?
Yeah, well after, we sort of drifted apart in a way, but we got back together and started rehearsals and writing for the second album. And the three of us did Back of a Car and Only Soul. And, well, that's what Andy wrote, but, I wrote some of the bits in there. I mean, in those three tunes, and we arranged them, and I was really happy with the way they were coming along. I had some pretty good ideas. I mean, I guess I was heavier on production than the rest of them were.
Yeah, I think on that album, The September Girls is the standout track. Was that taken off as a single, or...?
Yeah, they did a single of that. I don't know whether it was the first one or not.
Yeah.
I think Andrew Oldham or someone had contacted them about doing a single of Maud Lang with Chris Stainham playing piano.
Yeah.
And I think Alex went to New York to do some sessions with that, but I don't know if anything ever came of it.
So, which direction did you get into after the group had
I was pretty depressed about, the way things had gone with Big Star, because, I've made a really tremendous personal investment.
Yeah.
Into the group, and didn't see myself really getting into anything as good as that again, because to me, the combination of the four of us, regardless of our, personal difficulties, was the epitome of what I could get into musically as far as creative, input from the
I guess you must think, well, I've done this, what can I do next if you put your all into that?
I mean, I didn't think that the first album was the greatest thing that was ever done, but I felt like with the group that the second album would have been, really phenomenal. So, I just stayed away from music for a while because I was really going through bad. I don't know, I was going through depression and drinking all the time and being an alcoholic and that kind of stuff. So, gosh, for about 6 months, I wasn't really involved in music at all. I mean, I kept writing a few tunes, but, just took a job working, for an air freight company or something.
Was there a time when it got so low where you decided or thought about throwing the whole musical thing away, saying that's it, I've tried?
Yeah, still do, really,
Yeah.
'cause odds are pretty hard, and in a way, that's how I feel about Big Star, was that if we could overcome personal difficulties, if we could get it together, then I know that we could do something really well.
Yeah.
But right now, I think everybody's content to be doing stuff individually, other than Andy, who's not really doing anything at all.
Yeah. So, this brings us to your visit over here now. Can you tell me about, your solo album and what you're doing and what you're involved in?
Yeah, well, last summer I was starting to contact some different musicians in Memphis, and fortunately during the period, say from last summer to, after the 6 months when I left Big Star, I was being encouraged by a lot of nice guys, rock writers, Greg Shaw and Marty Surf and Les Scopa with Rolling Stone, and, were turning me on to people and so forth. And in a way brought me up, brought my spirits up about my music.
Yeah.
And were saying good things about what I did with Big Star. So, I got together with musicians in Memphis, and the only problem then was that most of them were all involved or trying to get something going, The scene in Memphis, as far as music was concerned, was that everybody was starving there, and if you could latch into a band that was doing a club gig and make some money, then they didn't want to, venture anything else. So I was trying to approach several people on the basis that, I would like to work with them in the sense that, say, Harrison or Clapton was working at that time, or Lennon or anybody, with a series of different musicians who in a way were trying to establish themselves but playing for other people, So it wasn't, the Big Star Band or the Elton John Band or something, but it was...
It was a list of musicians on an album.
For each cut, yeah.
Right.
Which appealed to a lot of people, so I was working with all kinds of different combinations in the studio,
Yeah.
I did one track. Big Star went in to cut one track, actually, finally, for my album.
Were you still contracted to Ardent at this time, or?
No. Jody is, I think, and Alex is.
Yeah.
Depending on whether they managed to lease this newest album of Alex's.
Yeah. So, how come you've come over here to?
Well, so my brother was living in Italy when I came over Christmas that I left Big Star.
Yeah.
I visited him in Switzerland, and we just started getting turned on to the scene in Europe, And plus the attraction to England, I guess. Well, he came home last summer and said he was interested in getting into the music business. So he, in a way, sponsored myself and Richard Roseborough from Radio City album to go over to Strawberry Studios to work, because I talked about it with him, and plus he's very keen on France, and has worked and lived in France before. So we went into Strawberry for about 2 weeks and cut some tracks. And the engineer at Strawberry, Claude Harper, used to work at Apple, turned us on to Jeff Emmerich at Air, so we rang up Jeff and came over to mix some tunes. Another thing I think was, when I was in LA a year back, I'd met Andrew Lauder, the United Artists, because Marty Surf had spoken to him about some of my tapes that he had, and Andrew was kind of anxious to do something, and, it was beginning to look like I might do something with you. So when I was in London, I talked to Andrew, and he seemed pretty excited about doing a single release on one of my tunes called I'm the Cosmos that I did in Memphis. Still, in a way, that's why I was here again.
Yeah, did you ever... You keep mentioning Memphis. Did you ever try and sort of get involved in another scene in another part of the country with different musicians? Or did you keep on finding this magnetic attraction?
Well, I went to LA for a couple of months. I mean, right before I went to LA, I was getting really fed up with Memphis, and I wanted to get back into the music scene. And there was not that much happening musically in Memphis, so I thought, right, well, I'm going to pack up my bags and head to the big city, in which case, it was London, because I'd wanted to live in England for 10 years at least, and I'm half English anyway, so I think I'm sort of drawn,
Yeah.
Halfway to here and halfway to the States. But I went to LA, and it seemed like I was short of funds, and most of the people I was meeting were rock writers rather than musicians, so I didn't get that heavily involved with musicians. I was there right around Christmas, and so I sort of came home for Christmas after meeting several people and contacting some, record company people and stuff like that. And went back for a couple of weeks, but nothing was happening, and I was pretty broke, so I just decided to head back to Memphis for a while.
Do the musicians over there tend to freely play between themselves?
Well, in LA, I would say it's sort of a set.
Presumably you have to sort of join an elite circle to get into a certain bunch of musicians, and then...
Especially in LA. I mean, I started to do some individual gigs in LA, and I played the Troubadour.
Yeah.
But it was the first solo gig that I'd ever played, and it was a very nervous experience.
Right.
I was terrified, because usually I'm able to hide behind a wall of amplifiers and 3 other guys. And I was not that excited about, becoming a James Taylor or something, Paul Simon, because I'm really more interested in rock and roll music.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, I mean, if you're going to go to a place like LA or New York and you want to play electric, I mean, it seems like the only way to do that is to have enough money to keep you alive there for, 1 or 2 years until you can hopefully meet enough people to get in with somebody or take a band with you. And I wasn't able to take a band with me at the time.
So it's really a sort of a closed circuit, and if you don't get on that circuit...
Yeah. In New York, maybe it's easier, but it's a more acoustic-oriented thing, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to meet people in Memphis, and in other parts, say in Memphis and New Orleans and Texas, it is easier to get in with other musicians, But where you can go from there is another thing altogether. And I don't know what's going to happen in London yet. I'd like to meet some other musicians, but I don't know really what's involved.
Yeah, and what musicians have played with you on the sessions? Is it just you?
All from Memphis. Andy, played on a couple of tracks. Jody played on one. Richard Roseborough played drums for most of the tracks, 3 or 4. Ken Woodley has helped me out a great deal. He plays bass guitar and organ for me.
Are they all your songs?
Yeah, all except for one, which is half written with a girl that I was producing back during Big Star days, and I tried to get her, it's a really good song, I tried to get her to finish it up and release it as a single, but she didn't want to do it, so I decided to use it myself.
Yeah. How much recording have you got left?
Well, I've got about an album's worth of tracks down, 16-track masters, but only about 8 mixes, but only say 3 or 4 of those I would consider final mixes.
Yeah.
So, I've got about 6 tracks that need overdubbing and mixing.
So when you've got all that done, presumably it's, you obviously could try and get a deal with somebody and get it distributed and...
Yeah, I'm trying to now because really, my brother's been sort of financing me.
Yeah.
Here. And, he's not a millionaire.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to get some record company backing now to go on and finish the tracks. Just off of, what I can play for them now.
Would you consider, what do you plan to do eventually? Would you say you're going to get a band together if you could, or just a few friends and do some live gigs? Or?
Yeah, I'd like to do some gigs here, throughout Europe, really.
Yeah.
And, in the States also. The people who played with me on my album are pretty keen on Europe. Ken and Richard, Richard was here last time working with me, and would love to do gigs, but it's just a matter of getting it together, for them to come.
Do you miss performing live?
Yeah, a great deal.
Yeah.
A lot, that's one reason really why I don't come and hear a lot of bands play, because you start to ache in a way, for the stage when you're sitting out there to be able to play, because, I enjoy the studio a lot, but it's really, nothing like being on stage. There's nothing as good for a band as performing live, to get you good and tight, of which I guess the Beatles were a perfect example.
Would you, do you think that if you sort of base yourself here, that the market, Europe, is more limited than the States, or do you think it's a bigger market? I guess in the States there's so many groups doing so many things, it must be hard to
It
work
seems
out.
to me, from what I found out, that the market, say in France and Britain, is more receptive
Yeah.
than the States. In the States it's pretty closed, and you can play rhythm and blues or soul or something if you're really good and tight and maybe sound like the average white band, then, you might get a contract or something. But if you're different, then they tend to be a bit wary of you.
Yeah, you think that the record companies over here are more open to a different sound?
Yeah, I think so. And, the people that we encountered in France had heard of Big Star, and they seemed very receptive to what was coming out of Memphis. Don Nix
Yeah.
and Jim Dickinson, and, say they're more cult followings or something.
Yeah, I think that's true actually, and Holland.
Yeah. I haven't encountered any of their music scene.
No, but I think that the Dutch, from what I gather, I mean, we get copies of Dutch magazines sent to us, and we sort of write to the people who run those. They seem to be much more aware of groups, American groups, and as you say, the French. Yeah, a cult following, I guess.
Yeah, because it's Strawberry, we read some magazines, some French magazines with articles about people that you'd never even hear about in the States, people that I know from Memphis and Tulsa and Texas, I was really impressed that they're receptive, to good sounds. Really open.
Have you said any groups, British groups, that you've been listening to, or presumably you've been mainly in the studio though since you've been over here?
Yeah. I listen to the radio sometimes, but
the radio's not too good.
And we've got, this, which just plays 3 stations, and I've got my own, sometimes I pick up some diverse stations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to, even at home, Bad Company a lot.
Yeah.
And, we were very big on Free before Big Star started. We played all of their tunes. I listen to a lot of what's happening here now, but it seems like the top 40 here is really into some sort of punk, bubblegum type music.
Yeah, it's gone full circle again, I mean, I think it's because of the size of the market over here. It's much smaller than what it is in the States.
They seem to really go for novelty here.
Yeah, that's true. I don't listen to the radio too much, actually. Perhaps that's being a little narrow-minded. But, as you say, it's rubbish, most of it.
Well, I still, I enjoy a lot of things that I hear, but a lot of it's American. I enjoyed Clapton's new album. I haven't heard Led Zeppelin's new album. I've heard a couple of tracks, and it seems like they're still doing the exact same stuff. Yeah. Which is a disappointment.
I think, actually, what it boils down to, perhaps, is that there's nothing really happening. People come and people go, and people make records, novelty records, as you say. And
yeah, I was very keen on Sparks when I first sort of saw them,
Yeah.
But, gosh, their music, it sort of is, just races or something.
Yeah. Although the sort of influences then for the first album seem very Anglo, I found that there was an American sound coming through. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way that was Alex. I mean, the Byrds and Todd Rundgren influenced Beach Boys, he was very big on all of those. And in a way that caused a very nice blend for the first album. Because I was, more into Who and Free and the Beatles.
Yeah. So you said earlier then that Ardent is folded, has it? As a record label?
Yeah, because it just got really bad, Manning and Fry got into some big arguments, and Manning split and is now with Stax. And, I guess financially they just couldn't hold it together, and plus Stax was almost folding themselves.
Yeah. What other artists were contracted to Ardent?
Brian Alexander Robertson, who's English. I mean, he did one album with them. I don't know if he's still contracted to them or not. Cargo and the Hot Dogs. Those are a good group. It's a ridiculous name.
Yeah.
But they had a very good album and did a damn good single, If I Walk the Line, which
Really?
I try to get. It's really, really good.
So what happened to all those people? I mean, did the contracts get transferred to Stax, or did they just...
Manning tried to get a hold of the Hot Dogs, I think, and bring them over to Stax, and said that they were his property or something. But the last thing I heard, they were getting up lawsuits and stuff. But I think Fry sort of, they had a new album out which was ready to go, and he's still trying to market Alex's, or I guess they're calling it Big Star. It's Alex and Jody.
But there wasn't
the new album in the Hot Dogs.
There wasn't then a third Big Star album as such.
No, when I was there, I think they were calling it Sister Lovers or something, because Andy and Jody date sisters, and the girls that they date are sisters, and I think that one of the chicks sang.
Yeah.
On a couple of the tapes, they did a version of You Really Got Me or something with a kid singing.
Yeah.
Which is real sort of David Bowie-like, And Alex has been, recently, he's gotten into some really decadent stuff. Sort of socially and musically, So his musical influences now are a lot towards Lou Reed, and Velvet Underground and stuff like that.